"Your name is on my ticket," he said, and I froze. The morning my wedding was supposed to happen, I was standing on platform 9 of Ashcombe Station at 6:11 in the morning, holding a train ticket instead of a bouquet. 4 days earlier, Eric had sat me down at our kitchen table, the one we'd picked out together because it wobbled less than the others in the store, and told me he wasn't ready. Not that he didn't love me, not that there was someone else. Just that he wasn't ready, as if readiness was a bus that had left without him, and he'd only just noticed the empty stop. I didn't cry that night. I cried 2 nights later in the shower, so long that the water ran cold and I didn't move until it did. By the fourth morning, I had a choice. I could stay in Ashcombe and let 200 people ask me gentle, well-meaning questions with their eyes. Or I could go stay with my Aunt Peg in Gray Harbor for 2 weeks, in the house with the crooked porch and the smell of salt and wood smoke, and let the ocean do whatever it is oceans do to people who don't know what else to do with themselves. I chose the ocean. So there I was, on the exact morning I was supposed to become somebody's wife. Wheeling a suitcase across platform 9 instead, wearing the coat I'd bought for the honeymoon because it was warm and gray and didn't remind me of anything. In my pocket was a small velvet box. I hadn't given the ring back yet. I told myself it was because Eric hadn't asked for it. That wasn't the real reason. I just wasn't ready to open my hand. The station was doing what stations do at that hour, half asleep and half in a hurry. A boy sold coffee from a cart with a squeaky wheel. An announcement crackled overhead, something about the 6:15 to Gray Harbor boarding on platform 9, car 7 toward the rear. I checked my ticket for the 10th time that morning, the way you check things when you don't trust your own hands. Car 7, seat 14. A? I didn't notice the man behind me in line until we were both trying to fit through the same narrow door of car 7 at the same time, both of us murmuring, "Sorry, after you know, please," in that useless dance strangers do. He stepped back to let me go first. He had a canvas bag over one shoulder, the kind photographers use, and a paper cup of coffee that had clearly gone cold, because he hadn't touched it since we'd been standing in line together. I found row 14. Window seat. A. I settled my suitcase into the overhead rack, sat down, and pulled out my ticket again, just to breathe. Just to have something to hold that wasn't the box in my pocket. That was when he arrived at the same row, checked the little seat number stenciled above the window, checked his ticket, and frowned. "I think there's been a mix-up," he said, not unkindly. "This is 14A. "It is," I said. "That's my seat." He held his ticket out, not accusing, just confused, the way you'd hand someone a puzzle piece that clearly didn't fit anywhere. I looked down at it. Car 7. Seat 14. Printed as clearly as mine. We stood there for a second, two people holding identical claim to the same 6 inches of upholstery, both too polite to be annoyed yet. "I'll get the conductor," he said, and went to find one. Coffee cup still in hand, forgotten. The conductor, a heavy-set man named Grady with a mustache that seemed to do most of his talking for him, examined both tickets under the aisle light, turning them over like he expected to find the joke printed on the back. Mine looked ordinary. His had a small paper slip stapled to the corner, the kind you get when a ticket has been reissued from another booking. Grady read the slip out loud, half to himself. Reissued from booking reference AV2214. Original holder, N. Callahan. I heard my own name and didn't understand it. Not right away. It took a second for the letters to rearrange themselves into something that made sense or didn't. The stranger looked at the slip stapled to his ticket. Then he looked up at me. Really looked. The way you look at someone when a fact refuses to sit still in your head. "Your name is on my ticket," he said. I froze. I don't know exactly what I expected life to throw at me that week. Somewhere on the list, admittedly a short list, was ocean air and quiet and maybe too many hours alone with my own thoughts. Nowhere on it was a stranger holding a piece of paper with my name stapled to his seat assignment, 4 days after my wedding had been called off, on the morning it was supposed to happen. That's not possible, I said, which is what people say when something is very obviously happening anyway. Grady, who had clearly seen stranger things in his years of wrangling passengers into the correct seats, was unbothered. Happens sometimes with reissued tickets. Somebody's original booking gets split, transferred, whatever, and the system doesn't always clean up the old name before it prints the new one. Nothing sinister. Just paperwork being paperwork. He glanced between us, then at the half-empty car. Car's not full today. Why don't you two just sit together, sort out whatever's going on with the booking once we're moving, and I'll flag it at the next stop if it's still bothering you. And that was that. Grady moved on down the aisle, mustache twitching with the particular satisfaction of a man who has solved a problem without actually solving anything. The stranger looked at me, then at the empty seat beside mine, 14B, and back at me again. I promise I'm not going to ask you anything about your reissued booking reference, he said. I don't even understand my own ticket most days. It was such a small, dry thing to say that it caught me off guard enough to almost laugh. Almost. I'm Julian, he said, sitting down, setting his cold coffee in the little plastic cup holder like it was an old friend he was done arguing with. Nora, I said. And because the silence that followed felt too big for the small space between us, I added, I really don't know why your ticket has my name on it. I believe you, he said. You have the face of someone who is as confused as I am. I did not tell him that my face, that particular morning, had a lot going on that had nothing to do with train tickets. I looked out the window instead, at Platform 9 sliding backward as the train pulled out, at Ashcombe Station shrinking into the gray early light, taking with it the venue I would have been getting ready in right about now, the dress still hanging in its garment bag in my closet at home because I hadn't been able to make myself return it yet. Julian didn't ask why a person travels with a suitcase and a face like mine on an ordinary Tuesday. He just sat there, quiet, watching the window too, like he understood that some silences are meant to be shared rather than filled. I noticed things about him in the gaps between my own thoughts. He had the stillness of someone used to waiting, the kind of stillness that isn't boredom, it's attention. He held his coffee cup without drinking from it, turning it slowly, like a man thinking through something he hadn't decided to say out loud yet. His camera bag sat between his feet, close, the way you keep something you don't want to lose track of. Long trip? I asked, mostly because the silence had gone on long enough that it needed a bridge. To Millport, then I'm not sure, he said. You? Gray Harbor. My aunt lives there. Visiting? Hiding, I said, before I could stop myself, and then felt my face go warm at how honest that had come out. He didn't flinch, didn't press. That's a legitimate reason to travel, he said. Better than most of the ones people give at check-in. What's yours? He was quiet for a moment, turning the coffee cup again. My father had a heart attack 4 days ago, he said. I haven't spoken to him in a little over a year. I'm going to see him. 4 days ago. The number landed somewhere near my ribs. I didn't say anything about the coincidence of our timelines because it felt too strange to name out loud. Two people whose lives had both quietly broken on the same morning, sitting in seats that shouldn't have matched. I'm sorry, I said instead, because it was true and because it was the only thing I could think to say that wouldn't require explaining myself further. Me too, he said, about whatever brought you onto this train with a face like that. I laughed, short and surprised, because he'd used my own unspoken thought against me, gently, without cruelty. It's a long story. We have, he checked his watch, an old habit I'd later learn he never broke even on his phone. About 5 hours until Millport. I'm told the scenery is unremarkable. I looked at him for a second. There was nothing pushy in the offer, no expectation dressed up as concern. Just an open door, left open, no pressure to walk through it. Maybe later, I said. Later works, he said, and went back to looking out the window, and something in me loosened by 1/2 inch, the smallest possible amount. but I felt it. We didn't talk much for the next stretch, but it wasn't the awkward kind of quiet. It was the kind two people fall into when they've silently agreed not to force anything. At some point, the cart attendant came through, and Julian bought 2 coffees, without asking if I wanted one. Just set the second cup on the little tray in front of me, like it was understood. "I didn't order this," I said. "I know," he said. "You looked like you needed something warm in your hands, more than you needed to be asked." I wrapped my fingers around the cup and found, a little uncomfortably, that he was right. Somewhere around the second hour, he asked what I did for work, and I told him I managed the produce orders for a small grocery chain, which sounded unglamorous when I said it out loud, though I explained how much I liked knowing exactly where things came from, which farm, which truck, which morning. He said that made sense to him, that a person who'd just had her future rearranged without warning might take comfort in a job built on things arriving when they were supposed to. I told him that was either very insightful or very unfair, and he said it was probably both. He told me in turn about growing up moving between his mother's house and his father's, about learning early to read a room the way other kids learned to read books because he never quite knew which version of a family he'd be walking into. I asked if that was why he'd ended up behind a camera, always watching, never quite in the frame himself. He went quiet for a second, turning his coffee cup, and said nobody had ever put it to him that plainly before, and that he wasn't sure he liked how accurate it sounded. "Sorry," I said. "Don't be," he said. "I think I needed someone to say it." The train rattled on through the gold-edged farmland, and somewhere in there I noticed I'd stopped checking the pocket with the velvet box in it every few minutes, the way I had all morning. I only noticed because I caught myself doing it again, a small, unconscious reflex, and realized it was the first time in an hour I'd forgotten to. The unremarkable scenery turned out to include 2 hours of pine forest, one long stretch of farmland going gold at the edges, and, around the 10th hour, mark of a 5-hour trip that had no business taking 10 hours, an announcement that made the whole car groan in unison. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a fallen tree across the line approximately 6 miles ahead near Millport, we'll be holding here for repairs. We expect a delay of at least 3 hours, possibly longer depending on crew availability. We apologize for the inconvenience." Grady walked the aisle afterward, delivering the same apologetic monologue to each row, the mustache doing extra work to soften the blow. When he reached us, he added, almost as an afterthought, "Given the delay, connecting services out of Millport tonight are likely to be canceled. Might want to plan on the Cedar Inn if you're passing through. Tell them Grady sent you, they'll do you right on the room rate." Julian and I looked at each other. Neither of us said anything about the strange, small joke the universe seemed to be playing. Stranding 2 strangers whose names had already gotten tangled up in a booking neither of them understood. "I don't suppose the Cedar Inn does a discount for people who've had unusually confusing mornings," I said. "I'll ask," Julian said. "I have a feeling I could use one too." We got off the train 2 hours later, once it crawled the last stretch into Millport Station, a squat brick building with a single vending machine and a bench that had clearly seen better decades. The fallen tree, we learned, had also taken down a line so the platform lights buzzed weakly, half of them dark. Outside, a light rain had started, the kind that doesn't announce itself, just quietly soaks through everything. Julian, without making a production of it, took off his jacket and held it out. "I'm fine," I said. "You're shivering." "It's October. Everyone's shivering." "Take the jacket, Nora." It was the first time he'd used my name, and something about hearing it in his voice, steady, a little amused, undid a small knot somewhere behind my sternum. I took the jacket. It smelled like coffee and cedar and something clean underneath that I didn't have a word for yet. The Cedar Inn was 3 blocks from the station, a low building with green shutters and a woman named Delia at the front desk, who did, in fact, give us a reduced rate once Julian mentioned Grady's name, along with a knowing look that suggested this wasn't the first time Grady had sent stranded couples her way. Neither of us corrected her assumption that we were a couple. It felt like too much explanation for too little payoff. 2 rooms adjacent on the second floor. We stood in the hallway a moment too long after Delia handed over the keys. I don't really want to sit alone in a motel room tonight, I said, surprising myself with the honesty of it. There's a diner across the street, Julian said. I saw the sign from the platform. Looked like the kind of place that's been serving the same 4 items since before either of us was born. Perfect, I said. I could use something that hasn't changed in a while. We didn't go straight there. Neither of us seemed to want the day to end quite yet, so we walked, slow and aimless, past a hardware store with its metal shutter half down, past a laundromat glowing yellow in the dusk, the rain still coming down in that soft, patient way that soaks through wool coats without ever seeming urgent about it. Julian ducked into a corner shop and came out with a single umbrella, cheap and striped, and held it over both of us without comment, angling it more toward my side than his own. You're getting wet, I said. I dry quickly, he said. It's a gift. We passed a church with its doors open for evening service, organ music drifting faintly into the street, and I felt my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with religion, and everything to do with what that music was supposed to have soundtracked for me 2 days from then, in a different building, in a different town. Julian noticed. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just steered us gently toward the other side of the street, toward a window display of secondhand books, and started narrating the worst possible titles he could find until I was laughing instead of holding my breath. You're very good at that, I said. At what? Noticing when something's about to knock me over and getting me looking somewhere else before it does. Occupational hazard, he said. You spend enough years filming weddings, you learn to read a room fast. Who's about to cry happy tears? Who's about to cry the other kind? Who needs a joke in the next 10 seconds or the whole thing falls apart on camera? Is that what you're doing right now? Managing me? He considered the question seriously, the way he seemed to consider most things. No, he said finally. I don't think so. I think I just don't like watching people carry things alone if I can help it. Old habit. Maybe the only good one I kept. The diner was called Baxter's, and it did in fact seem to have been serving the same 4 items since before either of us was born, based on the laminated menu, the corners soft with age. We sat in a booth by the window, rain streaking the glass. The lights of Millport smeared gold and red beyond it. Can I ask you something? Julian said once the coffee had arrived. And you can absolutely tell me it's none of my business. You can ask. What were you running from this morning, on the platform? You looked like someone walking away from a building on fire. I turned my coffee cup slowly, the same habit I'd noticed in him earlier, and wondered if habits like that were contagious, passed between strangers over the course of one strange day. I was supposed to get married today, I said. He didn't say sorry. He didn't say anything for a second, just held very still, the way people do when they understand that whatever comes next matters more than whatever they might say to fill the silence. 4 days ago, my fiancé told me he wasn't ready, I went on. Not a different woman, not cold feet exactly, just not ready. Like readiness was something that was supposed to arrive and simply didn't show up in time. I laughed, a small unhappy sound. I still have the dress. I still have the ring. I don't know what to do with either one. You're wearing it, Julian said quietly, nodding at the ring on my hand, the one I hadn't taken off yet, even though the box in my pocket held a second, smaller ring I'd bought for myself years ago on a trip with my mother before any of this. I hadn't realized until that moment that I'd been carrying 2 rings all day, one I couldn't take off and one I hadn't been able to put on. I don't know how to stop, I admitted. It feels like admitting it's really over. It is really over, he said gently, not unkindly. But you get to decide when you're ready to know that. Nobody else gets a vote. I looked at him properly then, across the sticky vinyl table, in the buzzing fluorescent light of a diner in a town neither of us had planned to visit. What about you? I said. Your father. Julian turned his own coffee cup. Slow circles, thinking. My parents split up when I was 9. He remarried 2 years later, had another family. The kind of family that photographs well at holidays. I was always sort of the guest who used to live there. He said it plainly, without self-pity, like a fact he'd made peace with a long time ago and just hadn't had reason to say out loud in a while. My marriage ended 18 months ago. My wife, Elise, left, and honestly, I understood why. I spent our whole marriage filming other people's weddings, other people's happiest days, and somewhere in there, I stopped showing up for my own life. She got tired of being married to a man who was always somewhere else, holding a camera, watching someone else fall in love. "You're a wedding videographer," I said. "Was," he said. "Mostly, I still take the occasional job. It's steady work, if strange work. You spend your whole career capturing the best day of other people's lives, and somehow it never quite rubs off on your own." Something in the back of my mind stirred, small and formless, a thought I didn't yet have the shape for. I let it pass. "My father hasn't spoken to me since the divorce," Julian went on. "Not out of anger, just distance, the kind that grows so slowly you don't notice it until it's a canyon. Then 4 days ago, I got a call from his wife saying he'd had a heart attack, and I realized I didn't actually know if I was still welcome to show up." "You're going anyway." "I'm going anyway," he agreed. "I don't know what I'll say to him. I've had 5, now apparently 10, soon to be who knows how many hours on this trip to figure it out, and I've got nothing." "Maybe you don't need to have it figured out," I said. "Maybe you just need to be in the room." He looked at me for a long moment, something soft and a little surprised in his face, like I'd handed him something he hadn't known he needed someone to say. "That's good advice for someone who's currently avoiding her own decisions about a ring in her pocket," he said, but gently, no bite in it. "Touché," I said, and for the first time since Eric sat me down at that wobbly kitchen table, I felt something that wasn't grief. It wasn't happiness either, not yet. It was closer to relief. The specific relief of being seen by someone who wasn't asking me to perform, being okay. We walked back to the Cedar Inn a little after 10. The rain thinned to a mist, the streets of Millport slick and quiet under the sodium lights. Outside my door, I fished in my coat pocket for the room key, and the small velvet box came out with it, tumbling to the carpet before I could catch it. Julian bent and picked it up before I did. He looked at it in his palm for a second. Just a small, dark box. Unremarkable, easy to mistake for nothing at all. He didn't open it. He didn't ask. "Yours," he said simply, and held it out. I took it, and something about the careful, unhurried way he'd handled it. No curiosity, no comment, just quiet respect for a thing he understood was heavier than it looked. Made my throat tighten in a way I hadn't expected. "Thank you," I said, "for not asking." "Some things don't need asking," he said. "Just holding on to until you're ready to open your hand." I thought about how strange it was that a stranger, on the exact day I hadn't gotten married, had somehow found the exact right words for the thing I hadn't been able to say to anyone. Not my aunt, not my mother, not even myself in the shower 2 nights before. "Good night, Julian," I said. "Good night, Nora." I lay awake a long time in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the last of the rain against the window, turning the little velvet box over in my hands in the dark, and thinking about a man 3 feet away through a thin motel wall who filmed other people's happy endings for a living and hadn't managed to hold on to his own. The line was cleared by morning, according to Delia at the front desk, who delivered the news along with 2 cups of coffee and a look that suggested she was disappointed the romance novel playing out in front of her was apparently ending on schedule. The next train to Gray Harbor, with a connection through Millport for Julian's onward leg toward his father's town, left at 8:40, 3 hours later than the one we should have been on the day before. We had breakfast at Baxter's again, the same booth, like we'd already built a small tradition out of a town we'd only known for 16 hours. "I looked into the booking thing," Julian said, halfway through his eggs, pulling a folded printout from his jacket pocket. Couldn't sleep, so I called the North Line Rail helpline at some ungodly hour. Actually got someone useful for once. And? You're not going to believe how boring the explanation is. Try me. I could use boring right now. He unfolded the printout and turned it toward me. Booking reference AV2214, he read. That's not a personal reservation. It's a group travel booking made for a block of wedding guest tickets. 12 seats purchased about 6 weeks ago under the name of the primary contact for the wedding party. Something cold moved through me. What wedding? Julian's eyes when he looked up had gone careful, the way people look when they're realizing something at the exact same moment as the person across from them. I didn't put it together until this morning, he said slowly. I had a video job 4 days ago. A wedding in Ashcombe. It got canceled the morning of, obviously, since there was no wedding to film. The coordinator, a woman named Bethany, called and apologized, said the deposit refund was tangled up in some accounting mess, but she'd square it with vendors another way. She mentioned a block of unused travel bookings that had already been paid for, guest transport, non-refundable, and said if anyone needed to get anywhere in the next couple weeks, she could reissue a seat under their name instead of losing the money entirely. I sat very still. I told her I needed to get to Millport to see my father, Julian went on. I didn't ask whose wedding it was. I didn't want to know. It felt like prying into someone's worst week for the sake of a free train ticket. He looked down at the printout again. The primary contact on the group booking. N. Callahan. That was my wedding, I said. My own voice sounded strange to me far away. You were supposed to film my wedding. Neither of us said anything for a moment. The diner clattered on around us, plates and coffee and someone's radio playing low behind the counter, entirely unaware that something had just quietly rearranged itself at our booth. I never saw a photo of you, Julian said finally. Never got a name attached to a face. Bethany just handled the vendor side. I would have shown up that morning with my camera and met you for the first time as the bride walking down the aisle, and I would have spent the whole day capturing what was supposed to be the best day of your life. He shook his head slowly, something between disbelief and a small, sad wonder. Instead, the wedding fell apart, and the leftover half of a paid-for seat put your name on my ticket, and I sat down next to you on a train without either of us having the faintest idea. It wasn't fate, I said, half to myself, testing the words. It was a clerical error, a forgotten deposit, and a woman named Bethany who hated leaving loose ends. It really was just paperwork, Julian agreed, and there was something almost funny about how deflating that was, how ordinary the machinery behind the strange coincidence turned out to be, once you opened it up and looked inside. No magic, no sign from the universe, just an overworked wedding coordinator trying to make an ugly week slightly less expensive for the people she owed. And yet, you were supposed to be there, I said. On the day I didn't get married, you were supposed to be standing in the back of a room, filming it. Instead, you ended up sitting next to me on a train on the exact same morning, listening to me talk about the very wedding you'd been hired to film. I know, Julian said quietly. I keep turning it over, and it doesn't get less strange. Does it feel like it means something? I asked. Or does it just feel like a coincidence that happens to be a very good story? He thought about that for a long moment, the way he thought about most things, carefully without rushing toward an answer, just to fill the silence. I think it means we were already connected in some small paperwork sort of way, before either of us knew it, he said. Not fate, just thread. The kind that gets sewn into your life by other people's decisions, long before you notice it's there. He looked at me. And I think it means that instead of standing in the back of a room with a camera, watching you promise yourself to someone else, I got to sit next to you and actually talk to you. Which, for what it's worth, I think I prefer. I felt my face go warm, and this time it had nothing to do with grief. I would have been a terrible bride yesterday anyway, I said. I hadn't even picked shoes that didn't hurt. I would have gotten some very unflattering footage of you wincing down the aisle, Julian agreed. And we both laughed, real laughter. The kind that surprises you with how much room it takes up in a chest that's been carrying something heavy for 4 days. We rode together as far as Millport Station's connecting platform, where our paths were finally set to split, mine continuing on to Gray Harbor, his branching off toward his father's town. We stood on the platform in the pale, washed-out light of a morning that had finally decided to be sunny, the rain from the night before evaporating off the tracks in thin curls of steam. I don't know what I'm going to say to him, Julian admitted, nodding toward the platform sign for his connection. I still don't have it figured out. You don't need to, I said, echoing his own words back to him. Just be in the room. I stole that from you originally, so it's only fair, he said, and smiled. And for a second, neither of us moved to say goodbye. I reached into my coat pocket, the same one that had betrayed the little velvet box the night before, and this time I took the box out on purpose. I opened my hand and looked at it, really looked at it, for the first time in 4 days. I think I'm ready to stop carrying this everywhere, I said. Not today, but soon. I think I know that now. That's not nothing, Julian said. No, I agreed. It's not nothing. He took a card from his camera bag, plain, simple, just his name and a phone number, no logo, nothing fancy. In case you ever want to know how the conversation with my father went, he said. Or in case you want to tell me what you finally decide to do with whatever's in that box. I took the card. In case you're ever back this way, I said. Gray Harbor has a lighthouse my aunt swears is the most photogenic thing in 3 counties. Might be worth your camera's time. I'll hold you to that, Julian said. The announcement came for his connecting train first. He picked up his bag, paused, and then, without making it into more than it was, reached out and squeezed my hand once. Briefly, warm and steady. The same hand that had picked a ring box up off a motel carpet without asking a single question. Good luck, Nora, he said. With all of it. You too, I said. With your father. And with showing up for your own life for once. He smiled at that, a real smile, a little crooked, and then he was walking toward his platform, camera bag over one shoulder, and I stood there and watched him go. The way you watch something you're not quite ready to stop watching yet. My train pulled into Gray Harbor a little after noon, into salt air and gray light, and the sound of gulls arguing over something down by the docks. Aunt Peg was waiting on the platform in her enormous orange coat, the one she'd owned as long as I could remember. And when she pulled me into a hug, she smelled like wood smoke and the sea, exactly the way home is supposed to smell when home is a place you only visit once a year. You look like you've had a week, she said, pulling back to study my face. You have no idea, I said. That night, sitting on the crooked porch with a blanket around my shoulders and the ocean going dark and silver in front of us, I took the little velvet box out of my pocket one last time. I opened it, finally, and looked at the ring inside. Eric's ring. A ring that had been meant for a life that was never going to happen after all. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just closed the box gently and set it on the small table beside me, no longer in my pocket, no longer something I had to carry against my body everywhere I went. Just a box on a table in a house by the sea, waiting for me to decide, in my own time, what came next. In my other pocket was a plain white card with a name and a number on it. No logo, nothing fancy. Belonging to a man who had once been hired to film the best day of my life, and instead had simply sat beside me while I found my way through one of the worst. I didn't call him that night. I wasn't ready yet, and for the first time in 4 days that felt all right. Some things don't need rushing. Some things are worth holding on to, quietly, patiently, until you're ready to open your hand. But I kept the card in my pocket anyway, right where I could find it for whenever that day came.